Well, I want to start and talk about your path to functional medicine, and what kind of led you there and away from traditional Western medicine.
Yeah, so it was really an organic path and started very subtly. I was pregnant with my first child when the primary care practitioner that I was working with passed away from cancer.
Oh,
And I would think I was maybe even like 2 or 3 months pregnant with Aiden. And back then, primary care was you woke up at 4 in the morning and you went into the hospitals to do all your rounds. And then you went into and I thought, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so the universe kind of led me to doing this path where I was doing physicals on firefighters and policemen and FBI agents. And it wasn't insurance based. It was government granted. And so we got to do this awesome blood work and do really advanced labs, even look at markers of inflammation and things like that. And we would see these guys, we would see them once or twice a year. And oftentimes we would pick up our entire treadmill testing and everything and go on site to the firehouses. So we would do like every single guy and do their physicals. So every year I would get this remarkable blood work that showed inflammation, cholesterol, just all of these risk factors. And most of the time, because
which is atypical, right? I mean, no, most primary care physicians do not do that level of blood work.
It's in an insurance-based system, but this was
Right.
government granted. We were looking for optimal health because these are our guys.
First responders. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and then what was cool about it was these guys were so sweet. They would be like, we would be there for days sometimes. Like if we did an entire firehouse, we would probably be there in that town for 3 days. And so those guys would be like, come and have dinner. We'll cook for you. And so I got this really fantastic view of what these guys' labs looked like on paper and looking in their kitchen and in their closet to see how they were eating, how they were sleeping, how they were exercising. And it literally changed the path of medicine for me and just sort of like veered into, and there's only so many physicals that you can do before you get a little bored of that. And I really wanted to get back into family practice. And the physical that I do today is still the same physical that we did on the firefighters. And I love it.
And I've had that physical personally, Sarah. It's very thorough.
Yeah.
I think I've got a clean bill of health for the most part, right? I'm about 95% there on my personal health journey. So functional medicine looks at your overall body function on a cellular level, right? You get that kind of data and you take in all of these other factors of lifestyle, exercise, diet, elimination, sleep, recovery, all of those things.
Exactly.
Is there a governing body to functional medicine that's kind of dictating? Or are they individualized within each practitioner?
So there's so many, it's such a gray line in where you practice medicine, right? And so, and people will come in and say, there's all these names out there, Swathi. There's integrative medicine, holistic medicine, homeopathic medicine, naturopathic medicine. Like, where are you in all this? And so functional medicine to me really means that you take every single aspect of healthcare and do what makes the body function most appropriately. And so there's an Institute for Functional Medicine. It's called IFM. That's sort of where I got most of my education and training. And it's a great resource, ifm.org, if anyone wants to find out a little bit more about it. But to be honest with you, even underneath IFM, there are so many people that are, to be honest with you, on different paths in their journey as well. You start doing functional medicine and you sort of toe dip in, tip your toe into the water. You start doing a little bit more. Maybe you start doing a little bit more diet and exercise work like I did with the firefighters. And then you start, my prescription pad was taken away from me with the firefighters because I wasn't their practitioner. And so then we started utilizing supplements more and just really start to go in. And now we're full-fledged, integrative practice to where if someone comes in and they have a blood pressure of, 200 over something, they're probably going to leave my practice with a prescription just like they would, but they're also going to leave my practice with a plan. Let's look at the underlying risk factors. Let's see why your blood pressure is where it is, and let's figure out a plan to reduce that. And so I think that's that difference. And that's what functional medicine is.
Mm-hmm. And so under your kind of be well family practice, and you have, eat well, sleep well, poop well, live well. Why has that been the governing kind of factors that defined, how you developed your practice?
Yeah. And it's been my defining practice of how I've practiced medicine, even from the very beginning. I think before I even knew what I was doing, transitioned into functional medicine, I'd never even heard that. I remember telling my kids when they were little, you have to eat well, sleep well, and move well, guys. And this is what's going to make you. It's almost intuitive, right? We just forget about it when it comes into medicine, but it's
Right.
intuitive for mom. Like, this is what your kids have to do, and that type of a thing. And so the things that we've added on to that eat well, sleep well, move well is you have to poop well. And the more I practice this medicine, and the reason why I think podcasts like yours, Jessica, are so important is you have to stress well, right? And I think you said live well, but this concept of stress as being a toxin in the body is just as much of an issue as anything else. And I think that's what this journey kind of has led me to. And so I've been telling people for so long, you have to eat well, sleep well, move well, and poop well, that when I opened up my own practice, of course, all my patients wanted me to call it the poop well practice. And I thought, a new patient one of these days, but that's where we came up with Be Well. And so, because you have to eat well, sleep well, move well, and poop well in order to be well.
And within each one of those, what does eating well look like? Is it individualized, or do you have kind of like this baseline of like, hey, these are the top 5 inflammatory foods that we try to avoid?
Yeah. So, I think sometimes in functional medicine, we focus a lot on what to avoid. But to be honest with you, when it comes to eat well, there's a lot that we should include. And so, 80% of eating well is you have to get your phytonutrients. You've got to be eating, 5 to 10 servings of good, colorful foods. M&Ms don't count, but
Right.
good, colorful foods every day. And, your purples, your greens, your yellows, we start with that even with our kids. And I think if half your plate can be vegetables, and then you're getting some kind of healthy protein, whether it be from animal fat or whether it be from nuts and seeds, I think that's the crux of eating well. I think the problem is in America, eating well for means eating a lot of carbs, eating a lot of refined foods, eating fast foods, not eating mindfully. And so to me, 80% of it is, hey, eat your veggies. Make sure that you're eating the to where, and then that last 20% I think is incredibly individualized. And there's 100 different diets out there. Like, which one is right for me? So you can have someone, this is where those markers that we look for in blood work, your body habitus, this is where it shows, do you need to be really low grain? Do you have some actual food sensitivities like gluten, dairy, soy, corn? Are these things that you have to avoid? What do we need to focus on from a mitochondrial standpoint? Do we need to feed your body so that you can have more energy? Do we need to, when are you eating? Are you better with intermittent fasting? Are you someone that shouldn't be eating at nighttime? All of those things we kind of dive into, and then we develop a plan for the patient. But anyone that doesn't have a functional medicine practitioner can automatically start eating more vegetables, can automatically start making sure that their body is well nourished. Those things don't change. And then move well. Again, I think this is, what are your goals, right? We have patients that come in that say, I want to win my next bodybuilding competition. We have patients that will say, I want to run, my next marathon. And then we have people that just say, hey, I want to lose a couple of pounds around my belly. I don't feel right in this body. And so what we do with that, but again, the solid crux of it is you have to exercise. You have to take time out, whether it just be getting a good walk every day, or whether it's a lot more intense than that, do something resistance training. There's that obvious portion, and then there's the more individualized portion. Sleep well is a huge deal. And
Amen. And all the moms out there listening that aren't sleeping well, right? There is help. I think I came to your practice and maybe you called me dead man walking in a nice way. I was functioning in full adrenal fatigue and chronic fatigue. And I'm about 95% where I'm actually really sleeping and waking up rested. And it is a long journey, but it is worth it. Sleep doesn't have to be elusive.
And I don't think people realize how important sleep is. And especially for and even my kids, like, I have such a hard time explaining to them, if you're a kiddo, you should be getting 10 to 12 hours of sleep per night.
Right.
And our kids are getting 8 hours of sleep per night. If you're an adult, you need to be getting 8 hours of sleep per night. My 14-year-old is in here laughing because we laugh about, we argue about this all the time. I'm like, buddy, 10 to 12 hours, like, that's what you need. And I think people think, I'm in bed for 8 hours. I might wake up 5 or 6 times per night, but I'm sleeping. Sleeping well means you fall asleep within 10 to 15 minutes, even a half hour if you're a reader or whatnot. And then you stay asleep all night long. You wake up feeling rested. And people are like, you can do that? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I remember, I was like, wait a minute, that happens as an adult, as a mom? What? You can go to sleep at night and wake up in the morning? I didn't even know that was possible.
And it's honestly, it's one of those things that's an education thing. And then when you do, you will never give it up. Right. Because like everything changes. And then poop well is, I mean, this is the crux of functional medicine. It really is. And so if you really think about why do we need to eat well, sleep well, and move well, it's because we want to enrich our microbiome. And so, it always cracks me up a little bit. Science, medicine and traditional medicine, we're always looking to what can we change with the human body that can make a difference. And I think the real trick of all of this is what can we do to change our microbiome to make a difference. Mm-hmm. So, whenever that was years ago, we cloned Dolly the sheep, right? And we thought once we had that DNA science figured out, we would know who was diabetic, who was going to have heart disease. We would be able to change genetic splicing, and boom, we have the answer to healthcare. Nothing changed since that time, right? What we realized was we were 99.9% exactly the same as one another. But if you were to clone our microbiome, and look at the DNA and the RNA of the bacteria, viruses, funguses, parasites, the extra stuff that lives in our body, you could almost to a T predict who has diabetes, who's going to have heart disease, who's going to have. And how do you change the microbiome? You change the microbiome by how you eat and how you move, how you rest. And particularly, that's the reason why we really emphasize poop well, is if you're someone that's not eating mindfully, if you're getting bloaty or gassy throughout the day, you have a lot of GI distension, or, God forbid, you have Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, things like that. These are huge red flags for autoimmune disease, heart disease, diabetes, dementia. And I think we dissociate those things from our gut to our physical body.
Mm-hmm. I want to go right into the gut microbiome, and I'm going to double back to food because I think there's some fun questions there. But, the interest and the education between the gut-brain connection over the last decade, 2 decades, came from like, this was something that we disregarded and we didn't pay attention to like, we think we have 2 brains, and then the stress influence on brain and gut health and what that means. And I get the impact of pooping well and what that says about where our body is in sympathetic versus parasympathetic. And are we high stress, high inflammation, high cortisol all the time? And they're talking even things like about poop transplants, gut microbiome transplants. I mean, the importance of that gut brain connection. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, Jessica, it's everything. And so, and what's really interesting to me, this is really cool. So I can't remember if this was Stanford, somewhere along the line, they did the study. And bear with me for a minute. It seems disconnected, but I'll tie it in. They looked at these college kids, right? And they looked at different ways the college kids got sick. Someone that might have broken a leg, or someone that had a viral infection. And they called it the cuddle factor. How much did you want to be around other people? And what they found was that when you had a bacterial or a viral infection, the cuddle factor went up. And so, and they were really talking about why would that be? Like, why would the human?
So we could transfer it?
Exactly right.
Like, my gosh, I'm mind blown.
I mean, right? Like it was such a cool concept. And I don't even think that was the finding that they were looking for. But what they were finding was that the virus or the pathogen that was invading the body took over the brain and altered your physical need so that it could have the ability to survive, reproduce, and grow.
When my children are sick, there's no time that they want to kiss me on the lips more.
Exactly.
I mean, I stand to test. Any mother out there knows that their snotty child wants to be so close in their face, sneezing in your mouth. It's that time.
It's exactly right. And so it was just this really cool idea. But you think about it, what happens when you feel stressed? Do you want to go and make a broccoli salad or something like that? Or do you want mac and cheese, right? It's comfort food. But the thing about it is, what is comfort food feeding? And that's the question. And what it's feeding is yeast and candida. And these types of things are microbiome that feeds off of sugar and stress, because the stress aggravates the growth of that. Now you crave the sugar because that's what's surviving in your system. And so it's one of those things where usually your body, especially if you're intuitive to what you need, is pretty good at giving you cues as to what to get or not get. Not in this particular case, because your microbiome takes over.
And then it's out of whack, which I would probably say 10 out of 10 people in this country would have a gut microbiome out of whack. And, the things with IBS on the rise and all of these other, GI tract issues. where do you even begin to start when, let someone's listening that has bloating, diarrhea, constipation, even just that distended feeling all the time, no matter what they eat or when,
Yeah.
where do they start to begin to heal?
And, to touch back to that, the most common thing that people tell us when they come in with those types of gut symptoms isn't, hey, Swathi, I'm here for you to heal my gut. It's they're telling me I feel exhausted all the time. I'm having trouble sleeping. I'm stressed all the time. I'm irritable, right? The people come in because of those things, not necessarily the other. But so where do you start? Where you start you start with food first, always. And so for me, if you don't have the capacity to be able to see a practitioner, this is where you remove some of those top 5 foods, right? So gluten, sugar, for sure. Like that is
it is the devil, and it's in everything.
It is.
And I don't think people realize at all.
Yeah, exactly right. Sugar, gluten, dairy, soy, corn. Those are sort of the big bad guys for me. And then even little things like a lot of times people are dairy free and they don't realize there's carrageenan in a lot of our dairy free products, which can cause a lot of issues, right? But and red food dye. I mean, you could go on and on. The bottom line is eat like what they used to eat like when there were cavemen. Like I'm a fan of that paleo concept, in that if you can hunt it, chase it, and if you can grow it, you're probably okay to eat it. Look for things that are more organic and don't have too many added ingredients to it. Food first, always. And then after that, you may trial a good probiotic and see what that does for you.
And define a good probiotic, because it's probably not the one that's at CVS on the shelf.
That's right. And that's the reason why this gets really difficult. And that's where not all supplements are created equal. I know we'll talk about this a little bit more later on, but this is the reason why a functional medicine provider is really important, because a good probiotic is a tough thing to find. And so, and probiotic foods, though, you can eat things like kombucha, yogurt that's not sweetened. Fermented foods are a great way to go.
Which can be a no-no if you've got a candida issue, right? So then that's where you got to seek out a functional medicine provider, seek out Swathi at Be Well. She's changed my life.
That's exactly. So this is where it gets complicated, right? Because the gut microbiome can be messed up in so many different ways. And the way I teach when we have med students or new nurse practitioners that are starting in our office is I say you've got to treat top to bottom. So there are bacteria that can overgrow in your stomach, and that acidy, milieu, like things like H. pylori. You got to treat those things first. Then there's bacteria that can grow in the small intestine. That's where you get that distension that's not related to food. You start out flat and you just get bigger and bigger and bigger all through the day. Those are, particular kinds of supplements that you use to treat that. And then you have the dysbiosis that's in your lower intestine, and there's different ways that you treat that. So when food isn't working, when the commonsensical things, hey, I'm sleeping better, I'm moving better, I'm trying to eat the best I can, I'm not feeling, I still have pain, I still have fatigue, I still have IBS symptoms, I'm still having diarrhea, this is when you go see somebody and say, hey, help me out, so we can individualize it a little bit more.
And I think it's really important. And I think the other thing too is to take control of your own health. And so many of us are gone down a path in traditional medicine where it's like, okay, I don't feel well, take a pill for this. Well, or take a, psychiatric medication, and I love what functional medicine has done for me and my entire family. We're all patients of Swathi. For my husband, finally, he was the last holdout, down to my littlest child, and we've had our life changed, because it is looking how best can you optimize your health? How can your body function at its most optimal level? And it isn't just giving, a Band-Aid to depression, anxiety, but it's looking at the root cause of those things. And we'll get into supplements and pharmaceuticals in a second, but I wanted to double back and talk about the increase in food sensitivities and why that's on the rise, and how, 30 years ago, no one had really gluten sensitivities, or dairy sensitivities. I mean, I didn't know about it when I was growing up. I don't know, 30 years ago, I guess I'm 40.
I think 100 years ago, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Exist, right? 30 years ago, I think they were probably forming. So this is my opinion about all of this. Is I think the reason why your body has sensitivities is, one, if you can't digest the food that you're eating. So I always say you eat your food in paragraphs.
I love that. Yes, it is. I've shared this too, by the way. It is so listen up. This is so important, and it changed my life to visualize like leaky gut and
Happens
what
with
happens.
food, right?
Yeah.
You eat your food in paragraphs. There's lots of information there that can help your body. You are supposed to chew your food, those of you that inhale your food, and break that paragraph down into sentences. Those sentences then go into your stomach and get broken down into sentence fragments, and even words. And then those words should go into your small intestine, and your gallbladder, your pancreas puts in digestive enzymes there that breaks it down into the letters of the alphabet. Those letters of the alphabet then go through that beautiful brush border in your small intestine. And then your body says, hey, thank you. I'm going to make my own words and my own sentences and my own paragraphs. And that's how your body functions. So at the very beginning, what happens if you're not eating mindfully? I kind of throw my husband under the bus about this one all the time, because I never knew there was the inhaling food statement. But there would be times when we would be on a date when I was just like getting my napkin ready and putting my food together. And I would look over and Jason's food was gone. I'm like, I'm sorry, where's your food? And he's like, I'm done eating it. And I would sit there and talk for the next 40 minutes and enjoy my food and eat it mindfully. There's a difference there. How in the world can your body even get the signal to make digestive enzymes if you've eaten your food so quickly?
Or on the run or in your car or standing up. I'm notorious for that.
Yeah. And, we are, right? We're busy. We want to get things done. We've got the next appointment. We want to be punctual. But the thing is, just eat mindfully. Take a few minutes, whether you're a God-fearing person or not, thanks for the food, and then start eating and allow your body to smell your food to, you should actually start to salivate a little bit when you have food, right? Mm-hmm. And then start eating it so that you can do that. And then what happens when your body is under stress? When your body is under stress, it says, if I'm being chased by a bear, if I stop to poop, I'll get eaten. If I stop to sleep, I'll get eaten. Who cares about digesting food? I need to know where the next exit is so that I can survive. So instinctively, when you're in that sympathetic mode, your body is going to turn down the production of digestive enzymes. Mm-hmm. So you will eat that food, and now no longer are you able to really break it down well. If that happens a lot and you don't break down your food well, then all of a sudden, sentence fragments and words start trying to breach that brush barrier. So instead of having this beautiful barrier, you get this kind of widened opening, right? That's, if you've ever Googled functional medicine, you'll hear leaky gut. Like that's one of the biggest things that we talk about. That's what that leaky gut is. Now, what is your body responsible for? It's not just responsible for digesting food, but it's responsible for killing bacteria that might enter in your food. We don't sterilize our food. Right. So once you have that leaky gut, now all of a sudden bacteria can go in, and now foods can go in, and your body says, I don't know what this word is. Like, this is not supposed to be here. This must be an enemy. Let me attack that. Mm-hmm. And you get inflammation, and that's when you get food sensitivities. And the thing about food sensitivities is you are absolutely increasing inflammation in your body, and that inflammation can then later on lead to heart disease, dementia, irritable bowel disease, and everything else. One of the foods that we know that will cause the brush border to get leaky is gluten, whether you're sensitive to it or not. And the problem is right now we put gluten in everything. And so that is one of the first things that we do, is just taking gluten out can make a difference. But we know gluten can really punch holes, cause leaky gut. And so mindfully eating, making sure that you maybe take some digestive enzymes if you're not eating well, taking care of stress, really, loving yourself and making sure that you're mindfully looking at your own self, and really making sure that you're digesting your food well is so huge. So in our office, it's not you are what you eat, it's you are what you absorb. Mm-hmm. And what
I love that.
And you are what you don't eat out.
Yeah. And the mindfulness piece is so important. And I think I want to come back and really stress that living mindfully and what that means, being present, right? So I love the Buddhist philosophy of when you eat. When you're with your friends, be with your friends. When you're on a walk. When you sleep. Don't be trying to do 50,000 things at once, which I understand we're all under pressure and under the gun, but even just making a very slight change, which I think is sitting down, feeling gratitude, whatever that looks like, whether it's, spiritual, religious, or just personal gratitude for a meal and sitting down and doing that. And I am notorious for standing up and ingesting a bar or a smoothie and running to the next thing. But how can I expect my body to function if I'm not going to be willing to sit down and take the time? And even if it's 5-10 minutes,
Yeah. And for me, it's a mantra that I use over and over and over again. And it's just a 4-phase mantra. It changes every now and then, but it's always be present, be mindful, be present, be mindful. And I just, so even between patients, my trick is I say my little mantra when I'm washing my hands. And I just say it over and over again because I do that in between, most patients. And so it's just, it resets your body so that you can be, I love that word, just be present with where you are. And before you walk in the door from work, be present, be mindful, and really give yourself the ability to do well. But especially before you eat, it doesn't take a lot of time necessarily. You just have to kind of thank you for this, and let me enjoy and really nourish my body with what I'm doing, whether it be food or friends or fellowship or anything, right? And I think that there's so much of a difference there. I think oftentimes people will come in and say, what supplements do I need? What do I need for this? What do I need for that? I'm like, stop. Like, what you need is to really be present.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And mindfulness and gratitude are both free and accessible to anyone at any time, regardless of
Free.
age, gender, sex, or socioeconomics. That ability to just be grateful for the food, to nourish your body, to take a moment. And I love that thing about being present because you can continue to do that even when you mess it up. And I pride myself on failing all the time, every day. But I have that ability to just be like, okay, and move on, or use this next moment to do a better job, or to be like, all right, didn't really do that one great. This is my next opportunity. And there's constantly that platform to just start again, to
Yeah.
practice mindfulness. And it's accessible to everyone. I think that is really important. It's free. We love free things.
And I will take it one step further, especially for the women out there, is we are very good about being grateful for all of the things around us. I'm so grateful for my spouse. I'm so grateful for my friends. I would challenge you to start to become grateful for who you are and what you offer the world. It's hard, but I'll tell you, you will get miles out of that. If you can feel it from your heart, not just say it out of your mouth.
Start saying it, and then you start to feel it. Sometimes you got to fake it until you make it. Maybe that first few times you're like, I don't know, but really saying, I love myself.
Yeah, exactly right. It's hard for me. I think you can love yourself, but not appreciate yourself. And I think if you can really do that, I've had people that have come to that actualization and their pain has gotten better. So there's so much of that wrapped up in your guilt, in your not feeling like you're accomplishing whatever it is that you've set your goal to accomplish. And just by giving yourself that gratitude and that self-love, it's unbelievable how many things change with that.
And loving our bodies, I think that's another hard one for women, especially, pre and postnatal, and what our bodies go through and the changes. And as we age, and men get to age gracefully and, get more handsome as they get older. And women have this, incredibly tough stigma of, getting older is looked at as, not beautiful, not attractive. And so we fight with that, but really being thankful, and obviously easier said than done, for this incredible body, the body that grew life and then fed life. And then, what it does to carry us through the day, and really starting to appreciate whether like every nook and cranny is, not as important as, appreciating what you have.
That's right. And I think I like the nook and cranny thing. My closet's a mess sometimes, but I can say I've got a beautiful sun nook, right? Like, so it's what portions of your body do you appreciate, and do you linger on? Is it the nook and cranny that's the closet or the drawer that's a mess, or is it the rest of it that's so beautiful? I think that's where we have to go to. And that doesn't mean loving yourself and appreciating your body doesn't mean that you don't want to make changes and that you don't have goals, but you can do those things at the same time.
I agree. Let's talk about what happened over the pandemic in the last year and how functional medicine changed. And I think, our family called, it was like, all right, what do I need to do to arm my body, to arm myself with information, to get my body at an optimal level? How did your functional medicine practice change as we, all went into this global worldwide pandemic?
COVID-19 was such a different kind of a virus than we've ever seen before. But to be honest with you, those of us that have been doing functional medicine for a long time, it's literally like we studied for this. You know what I mean? And so because their COVID was broken up into, and I think most of us know this now, into an infectious portion, which is very much like what you would get with the flu or something like that. It was not the infectious portion of COVID that was dangerous. There was an inflammatory component to COVID That's what was killing us.
Mhm.
And then I believe that there was a neuroinflammatory component to COVID. And then there was the recovery component. So what's really interesting about it is that if you started out and you were exposed to COVID and your inflammatory rates were low, your body was healthy, you weren't inflamed, you did pretty well through COVID. But if you
Mhm.
started out with COVID and your inflammation was already here, that additional inflammation that COVID warranted really threw you into the hospital on ventilators. Well, what was it affecting? And this is what functional medicine does is we look to the root causes of how do we reduce inflammation? And we know looking at it, even when you're young, what is your inflammation looking like? So I could have told you in my patient base who was going to do well with COVID and who wasn't, irrespective of their age. And so, and I feel like with COVID, it really showed us where we lack in traditional medicine. And I'm a fan of traditional medicine. I use it all the time, but it showed us where we lack in preventative medicine and
Mhm.
also really and honestly our socioeconomic differences and our race differences. This was a pandemic on multiple different levels, not just about the virus. And I think if you look at it, someone that has access to well, what am I trying to say? Gardens outside, Whole Foods, Earth Fare, you have access to all of these types of foods is going to be different from an inflammatory perspective than a place where the village pantry is the only source of food that you can get. And so there was a reason why there was a socioeconomic difference with how COVID affected us. And I think that reason is screams functional medicine. So
Mhm.
the real question that COVID made us think, those of us that do functional medicine, is how do we reach a bigger population with
Yeah.
preventative medicine? And how do we make it affordable? And that's the hard part because it requires time, it requires testing, it requires these types of things. And right now none of these things are covered by insurance. And then on the flip end, we spend a lot of money on ventilators and oxygen and hospital stays, not just with COVID, but with heart disease, with diabetes
Yeah.
and chronic disease on the rise. But I thought it was just a really neat way to do that. And also, how do you access your patients? That's what changed with our practice.
Mhm.
Is we started, I mean, look at our Zoom calls, look at all of the
Mhm.
things that we're doing that I don't know if I would have been, I don't know if that would have been the bandwagon that I would have hopped on without COVID. And so
Sure.
I think the word for COVID-19 was it showed us how resilient we are because we had to show our resiliency on so many different fronts.
Did you see your practice changing moving forward, to access more patients, any kind of to be able to maybe educate? I mean, education was big
Yeah.
too, food education. We walked into in Indianapolis and Indiana as a state to a very different socioeconomic. I mean, the food deserts were extreme and they were growing in number. They were not, decreasing. And, the access to resources outside of the metro area of Indianapolis were so few and far between that we walked into that with, on a high alert anyway.
Right. So the biggest place where it changed was one of the things I'm most proud of at Be Well Family Care is we do group visits, and I built a teaching kitchen inside my family practice because it's one thing to say, "Hey guys, I want you to eat better. See you next time," and it's another thing to say, "Come in, let me show you how, and let's cook together." And so I'm
Mhm.
super proud of the teaching kitchen. Like if you've ever talked to me, I'll talk to you about it forever and ever. It's my brainchild, right? And so, but it's interesting. The teaching kitchen fits about 10 to 12 people. And so COVID-19 came around. Obviously, we couldn't fill the kitchen with 10 to 12 people. So we thought, what do we do? And we did virtual group visits, where with our normal group visits, we were able to, as really take care of 10 to 12 visits. I mean, we did a yoga class together, Jessica, right, with one of
Mhm.
our virtual group visits. We did one virtual group visit class where we had over 100 participants on.
Oh, that's great.
I mean, it was so cool. And I honestly don't know if I would have thought of that. Before
Mhm.
COVID, I was very much tied into hands-on and let me get this community and fellowship together. And you do lose some of that fellowship. There's
Mhm.
something that you gain when you're cooking next to somebody and getting your hands, into that process. Having said that, the knowledge that we were sharing during those types of visits, we were able to reach so many more people. And by the way, our virtual group visits and our regular group visits are open to everyone. So you do not have to be a patient at Be Well in order to come in and do our group visits. And so that's a big thing. I think that's something that people don't really realize. But yeah, we were able to reach so many more people. That was a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing about it was that I felt like we really did our fair share in really educating specifically about COVID. The bad thing was we are slammed right now at Be Well, and so our wait list is going, and so we're hiring new practitioners. And so in a couple of months, we'll be able to really accommodate that. But I think it was really fun to see that uptick in interest in functional medicine.
That's great. That's great. I want to go from there and talk about pharmaceuticals versus supplements. And are supplements pharmaceuticals without a prescription pad? What are the differences? What are the similarities, pros and cons?
Yeah, this is the biggest thing that I see when new practitioners, I do a lot of mentoring and a lot of teaching. And this is the biggest thing I see when you have someone that's an MD that's transitioning into functional medicine, is it's easy to say, hey, you know what, I want to prescribe metformin for this patient. What's the metformin alternative? Oh yeah, it's berberine. And so to substitute those two things, that is not how I think supplements should be utilized. I think the difference is functional medicine is all biochemistry. And so if you are a practitioner or someone that love biochemistry, you'll love functional medicine. So it's looking at the process that happens in the body, the biochemical process, and looking down and saying, where are we having gaps? So for example, if you have issues with your thyroid, is there a zinc deficiency? Is there an iodine deficiency? Is there something happening with your selenium intake? Can eating, more nuts, solve that issue? Or do we need a pill or a medicine? And so that's the difference. And so I think it can be to where you can use 5-HTP instead of Prozac, those types of things, but that's not how it should be. It should be really looking at the elemental and the orthomolecular, right, reasons why you might have different issues in your body. And so to me, that's where doing really good blood work comes in. That's where being able to look at someone's physical exam and looking at your nails and looking at your tongue and looking at what's happening and say, you know what, these are the minerals. These are the things that your body is deprived of. What do we do from food and with supplements? And supplements should be supplemental to food. They should not take the place of food, right? They should be supplemental to food. And how do we get your body functioning optimally? Mm-hmm. Whereas I think a med is you wait for the disease to start. And then once you have an ICD-10 diagnosis of a disease, then you say, what do I do to really reduce the symptoms of that disease? Mm-hmm. Whereas in functional medicine, it's let's fix the biochemical pathways that may lead to disease, make you optimal so that you don't get diseased. Mm-hmm. So I always say it's the difference between disease and dis-ease. Mm-hmm. Is your body in not optimal function? And so I think that's where supplements should be used. But it is, sometimes it's easy to say, oh, you don't want to take a statin, you can take red yeast rice, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of those types of things in there. And so if you Google them, and anyone that Googles this will find those things, just remember that's not the concept of what good holistic medicine is all about. It's really about looking for, why do you need the statin? What do we need to change for that? That doesn't mean we won't use it, because, sometimes you have to reduce the risk factor while you're trying to find the underlying causes of it. But that's the difference to me.
Yeah. You keep coming back to food, and I think the body's own innate ability to heal itself, and giving kind of that space and platform and maybe a little help along the way, or encouragement or education for the body really to get it back onto a homeostasis level where it is functioning optimally without layering on medication, supplements, prescriptions, things like that.
It's 15 years ago. If you had asked me in my heart, if you could just eat well, sleep well, and poop well, and move well, you would be fantastic. I got to tell you today, I don't know if I could do the kind of medicine I do without the supplements. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. And this is where you said 30 years ago, and I said 200 years ago. I do think that there's a difference in our food from 200 years ago.
Oh, 100%.
Right? Like, I don't know, I don't know if we can eat ourselves out of a vitamin D deficiency. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I know that we probably can't, or, sunbathe ourselves out of a vitamin D deficiency. So I'm a little heartbroken to tell you, we use a lot of supplements in our practice. Mm-hmm. But I always go back to, this is to supplement a good, healthy lifestyle. But I will tell you, like, to fix some of those underlying biochemical issues, I don't know if you can always eat yourself out of everything. And then, of course, the better you eat, the fewer supplements you take. And then there are some people that come in that are like, hey, you know what? If I get a carrot in every now and then, like, I'm doing a good job, right? And it's that start, and then you have to slowly change those habits.
And it's probably the carrot that's been stripped down of nutrition, that's prepackaged in plastic, that has been cut down. And unfortunately, and that's an entirely different podcast, but the foods chain supply and what we've done to mass produce food and strip it out of nutrients and pick it way early and then ship it and plastic size it and all that great stuff, which is killing us. But that's an FDA. That's an FDA podcast. I know. So I know you see like whole families. Like I said, I mentioned our entire family are your patients, and I've seen such incredible personal turnarounds. Do you have kind of maybe the hardest case and then maybe the biggest success story that you've seen within your practice?
Oh, that's a great question. Boy, hardest case. The hardest cases for me are the folks that come in that are well into their 80s. It's usually the moms of someone that I've been taking care of. It's really tough to do preventative medicine when you've already have a lot of disease. It is fascinating, though, how much you can make changes. So we had she's probably 84-year-old mom that came in that has suffered with pain all of her life. And we did, a couple of different changes. And within 3 months, she was actually off of 2 or 3 of her meds already, and had come in and said, I'm feeling better. I'm not in so much pain. I'm hanging out with the grandkids more. And what was really cool about it was the grandkids that came in and said, hey, you know what? Grammy's been around a lot more. And thanks for what you're doing for her. I think she's really making a difference. But those are like, so I love, my favorite is when you can start with the kids, because, if you can establish really good and even seeing their grandma change with how she's eating and her body functioning better. And then you see these young kids that are like, you know what, I'm going to help grandma eat more vegetables. Like, I know mom yells at me about that, but I'm going to do it now. I'm feeling better too. Like, that's such a cool thing. Like, that's what family practice is all about, is you can see anyone from a newborn all the way up to someone that's in their 90s. And it's such a cool thing when you see a full family together, because when a family heals together, I think it makes it so much easier. Right.
Well, it's hard to be the lone one out there not eating gluten and dairy if everybody's eating, fast food and beignets and grilled cheeses.
And even just sugar, right? Like, it's hard when you are trying so hard to be like this and you open your cupboard and there's just all kinds of junk in there and everything else. And so that's why I love seeing practices. But I recently had a really fun, I wish I could share the pictures with you guys, but we had a patient that came in to see us, probably late 60s, early 70s, pretty severe psoriasis. And so we have pictures of his legs, and I mean, they're just covered.
Oh, I've seen them. You showed them to me in the practice.
So I just saw him again last week, and he was so cute. Like, came in with his shorts on, and he's like, "It's season again. I can show off my legs," and just these beautiful legs, and just from taking a few supplements and just eating really clean and taking some things out of his diet. And I love that one, because so often inflammation is unseen. We feel it in our pain. We feel it with our brain fog. By the way, guys, it's inflammation of the brain. Okay, so when you can't remember words, that's such a common thing that I think we just throw to, my age or whatever.
Mom brain.
Yeah, mom brain. I didn't sleep, whatever. That's inflammation, guys. So those things are so subtle and you can't see them. So I love the autoimmune. I mean, I don't love people having autoimmune disease, but I love the autoimmune diseases that you can see, because you see the difference. You can take a picture of it. You can show it to them. And, we all fall off the wagon and start going back to our old ways. Right. And so it's fun to be able to be like, look, like, this is where you should be. And so, but I love, that's one of my favorite patients, because it's super cute. And when a guy comes in and he's so proud of wearing his shorts, this is fun. Yeah.
Because psoriasis, I can speak from in our family, my daughter also has it on her head, but in your having that, it affects your self-esteem and your quality of life, and you don't feel comfortable in your skin. And, to have that kind of life change is profound. I think you start to feel so much better.
Mhm. And I think it's motivating because you can say, look at the kind of inflammation that's happening on your skin. That is what's happening inside your body all over,
Mhm.
even in your brain, at the vessels, every single place. That's motivating. And I think people can really look to that and be like, okay, I know what to do to make change. And
Mhm.
so, but I will tell you, even if your inflammation isn't on your skin, if you're aware enough, and this goes back to being mindful enough, you'll notice the changes that these types of things
Mhm.
will won't crash in the middle of the afternoon as much. You will, your recall for words will be a lot better. Those types of things. Well, your skin will look better. You'll start to
Mhm.
glow. There's just certain things like that are subtle, but you see those differences with these little changes that you can make.
Yeah.
That's the best part of functional medicine.
It is. I'm going to share my little personal story about Eva. So recently, Eva was pretty upset that she found out that she has a pretty extreme gluten intolerance, and, was, I think, came out really down, despondent, frustrated, out of the point, which I get it. She's also a foodie. She came from a family of foodies. And I had to remind her, prior to seeing you, we were handed a pediatric fibromyalgia diagnosis for Eva after a 15-minute appointment with a rheumatologist, and she had so much pain all over her body to the touch. I couldn't hug her, I couldn't touch her. I reminded her, I said, before we started on this path, I know that we're taking supplements and we're making some dietary and lifestyle changes that often your friends don't have to do. I said, but let's remember where we were a year ago, 18 months ago. And I will have to say, you'll be proud of that. She came in to me, and obviously we took gluten out, and she's like, she had eczema or, little rashes on her skin. And she's like, Mommy, I need you to feel my skin. It's so smooth now, because it's hard for kids. They're not as aware in their body. Eva said, well, I don't feel anything when I'm eating gluten, and I don't feel any kind of repercussions. And for her to come in and notice and be really proud and excited and said, okay, this little lifestyle change that I know felt really big at the time has created, this positive impact. I feel more comfortable in my skin. I feel better about my, self-esteem and putting my best self forward, because I don't have these issues on my arms that bothered me that, I didn't know. So that's a small little success story that I got from a 12-year-old preteen, which is big.
So proud of her and so proud of you and the whole family, because it's a family journey that you
Yeah.
have to take, right? And so, what you said was so true. Sensitivities are very subtle, but they're very, very marked. And so what that means is that you may have gluten in your life and you may have no idea. You may even take it out for a couple of days and feel no difference, because sensitivities really manifest days to even weeks after you have that food.
Mhm.
Allergy, you could eat a peanut and your body has an anaphylactic reaction to it. You eat the peanut, you get the rash. Very easy to correlate that, right? Food sensitivities, the best way to see if you have a food sensitivity is you have to come off of that food completely for about 4 to 6 weeks. It takes about that long for your immune system to say, oh, I don't have to be on fire. I don't have to be on all the time because this trigger keeps coming into my body. It will really tamp down. And then we actually encourage our patients to have a glutinous day. And so go and eat whatever. Don't go and eat a pizza where you're introducing gluten and dairy and corn and everything.
Sugar.
Yeah, right. Because then you're like, what am I sensitive to? Because I felt terrible. And you have to start all over again. But go eat some bread and see what happens. And that's when you will feel miserable. And so people will say, I never felt this bad when I was just eating gluten before. But what I'll say, it's subtle, is every day there's inflammation. And that inflammation can present with ADD, depression, anxiety, pain, diarrhea. I mean, it's eczema. I mean, you name it. There's that migraines, right? All of that kind of stuff. So another, when people will say, do I need to do blood testing for food sensitivities? Like, what do I need to do? Come off of it for 4 to 6 weeks. Have to be good during those 4 to 6 weeks. Add it back in and see what happens.
Sure.
And you have to really look for reactions that next week. Might not be that day. It might be the next day or the day after.
Sure. Mine, I think, happens usually 4 to 5 days after if I have gluten.
And so
it's not even that, yeah.
Brain fog. Like I can just tell, like the next couple of days, like I just don't function as well as I normally would. And so that's kind of where I noticed the biggest difference.
Awesome. Well, Swathi, it's been so insightful. Thank you so much. Where can listeners find more about you and your practice?
bewellfamilycare.com. And then remember, if you are out of the state or if you want to do things that are a little bit more nationally, visit the IFM website, the Institute for Functional Medicine. But bewellfamilycare.com should have, once we start getting our virtual visits going again, we should have links to all of those things. So come join us for a class. I think you guys might like it. And when we're back open again, hopefully by the end of summer, beginning of fall, definitely come in-house to some of our group visits. We'd love to see you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. I really appreciate your time.
For what you do, Jessica. This podcast is so, I love it.
I'm excited. Thank you.
Soon.
All right. Bye.